volume's on today. All right, so first things first, as mentioned, my name is Sean Ryland. You can call me Sean, you can call me Ryland, you can call me Teach, you can call me Professor, call me whatever you want. I'm not a very formal teacher, so please don't be intimidated. The main thing I want you to do is just know who I am and feel comfortable talking to me if you have any issues with this class, with it, whether it be submitting assignments, getting access to assignments if you're having technology problems, or if you just don't get the material. There will be a lot of that too. This class moves pretty quickly. So regardless of how well you've done in other classes, how prepared you feel for this class, there's going to be times where you're going to feel confused. And that's normal. You're not behind just because you feel confused. Everybody will feel confused in this class at some point. And I think we had a couple problems that nobody has been able to solve without getting help in this class. A couple of word problems, challenge problems. So if you like challenge problems, if you're good at math and algebra, then see that as a challenge. That's the point. It's a puzzle to try and solve. But I also just bring that up not to intimidate anybody, but just to make sure that you all are aware that just because you're feeling a little bit behind doesn't mean you actually are. Just means that this is a fast-paced course and it's going to take a lot of kind of keeping up. With that said, the number, let's see, what did I have on? So when we're talking about syllabus days, I've gotten lots of questions. I've been doing this for about 10 years at this point. I've tried to distill my syllabus day into stuff, one, keep it relatively interesting, and two, try to give you information you actually need. I'm not going to stand up here and read the syllabus because I assume you're all capable of reading at this point. So you can read the syllabus, and if you have questions about anything in particular, again, come talk to me. But a lot of what does something mean on the syllabus? Office hours don't particularly apply to this group because for the most part, I spend my time over at the college campus. If any of you are ever over at the college campus and are spending time over there during the week, you can try and find me over there for office hours. I do have an office over there. But you will also have Mr. Toms for additional help if you're having questions. Does everybody know what office hours mean for a college class? Somebody want to define it? Nobody's feeling brave? Go for it.
You can talk to your teacher about stuff.
Exactly. And that's a really common misconception. People that are, especially if you're a first generation college student, if your parents didn't go tell you what office hours mean, it's kind of an expectation that among a lot of professors, like, oh, they know what office hours mean. I don't have to define that. Office hours is time for you to find your teacher and ask specific questions. I've had people misinterpret that before. I mean, like, oh, office hours, that's when he's doing like paperwork in his office and you're not supposed to bother him. That's false. Absolutely the exact opposite. Office hours are when you know you can find me. Again, it doesn't apply as much here, but just for life skills. When you see office hours, that's when you're supposed to bother your teacher with questions because it's not really a bother. If I'm sitting there answering emails, I'd much rather be talking to one of you about chemistry than answering emails. So you won't have that as much in this class, but you will have each other, and you will also have Mr. Toms. But if you do have any other questions about the syllabus, please don't hesitate to ask like just generic questions like, what does that mean? What is a student learning outcome? Like, it seems really obvious on the surface, student learning outcome, but it's actually got a very specific meaning in higher education, stuff like that. You see anything that looks weird and you want to know more about it, ask, raise your hand, interrupt. The other thing we'll talk a little bit about is class design, because contrary to what I remember about my college classes and my high school classes, I remember like, why the heck would they ever do this? Or what classes are just designed seemingly randomly. There is some element to that, but for the most part, anything in this class or in a college class is there by design. Right? So if it seems like you don't understand why I would make the due date midnight on a Sunday night or something like that, ask me why I'm making the due date when it is. I probably have a some thought that went into it, but it also might be flexible. So if you have questions about why something is the way it is in the class, and whether that, especially if it's not working for you, let me know, because there's a decent chance we can change that. Syllabus is what's called a living document, meaning we can change it if it suits us better to change the structure of the class. By us, I mean me and you collectively. Obviously, being the teacher, I get final veto power, but I want to hear from all of you too. If you have better ideas about how things should be done, how you want to turn stuff in, how we're assigning things, anything along those lines. In the main place that I see that, where is there's the syllabus. So I uploaded the syllabus to our Canvas shell earlier today, but and I will also add a download link to this. But the number one thing that I always remember wanting to know from a syllabus is, one, schedule, and two, what was the grade distribution? What percentage of the grade is the test, and what percentage of the grade are the labs and stuff like that? So that's kind of what I'm going to focus on going through the syllabus today. Put the schedule front and center. And again, this is going to be somewhat fluid as we take, like we might take an extra lecture on certain topics, but depending on how y'all are doing, or we might go faster through some areas. That almost never happens. But occasionally, if we're really, if I have 5 lectures scheduled for talking about equilibrium, and you guys are really, really good at equilibrium, it turns out, and we finish it in 4, and everybody's feeling good about it, then we might, adjust what this timeline looks like. More frequently, we wind up pushing stuff back. So there's a couple TBA days in here, where we, especially towards the end, where I'm not quite sure what we're going to cover yet, but probably it's going to be stuff from before that been pushed into that TBA section. Also accounts a little bit for snow days. Haven't had any snow days yet, other than the snow day that wasn't a snow day, 3 weeks ago, one before MLK Day. I think that this schedule is relatively good. We'll have lots of time, because this class was actually designed around being a 12-week course. We do quarters that are only 12 weeks long at the college. But I actually have more like 18 weeks here. I don't think it's actually 18 weeks. I think I miscounted somewhere in there. But we have lots of time. So basically, we'll be able to sort of spread out and sort of take our time a little bit, to make sure we cover all the material and everybody really understands it. This is sort of the official syllabus where you actually want to be paying attention when it comes to deadlines and what assignments you have coming up is going to be the Canvas shell. So Canvas shell is going to look like this. Announcements are going to show up at the top that should also push a notification out to your phone or whatever device you're using to access Canvas. But that's going to be the number one way I communicate with you as a group. Going to be announcements on Canvas, including posting keys for various assignments, stuff like that. So this is going to be the number one place you go. Announcements are at the top, and then these are the number one place, or the second thing to look for. Is basically every week I'll update this and move the red box one spot over every week, and that's going to be just basically a link to the PowerPoint slides as a PDF, and a link to those recordings, the video recordings. You're going to find them in here. So if we went to week 1, for instance, it's got some other stuff, but the thing that will always be in these is, here's the slides, here's the link to the video. But obviously, I don't have the video up for lecture 1 right now because I'm recording it as we speak. But as soon as we're done here, and as soon as it's done rendering and I get it downloaded and uploaded and linked and everything, then that'll be a link to a YouTube channel it's going to have all of our recordings for this class. And again, we don't have a great setup for recording board work, especially. Mostly the recording is going to be my audio and whatever's shown on this screen. So you're still going to want to take notes, obviously, and being here is better than not being here. But any board work, any practice working through various problems, you might have to get from your notes or from someone else. But at the very least, you should be able to get the audio and see the slides as I'm talking. Questions so far? Okay. The other stuff that'll be on some of these, sometimes I have some links to the various assignments. Sometimes I get lazy and I don't update these, and sometimes it's just the lecture and videos linked. There's usually a couple other resources though from some online textbooks that have most of the same information. The number one resource that you're going to want to use though is going to be the lecture slides and the lectures themselves. We have textbooks in the back that have all the same information. I'm going to link online versions of that information as well. But push comes to shove, if you're here taking good notes and paying attention, that's probably all the resources you really need. You don't really need the outside textbooks unless you want extra depth on certain things, which seems counterintuitive. Why do we have textbooks if we're not really going to use them? Different people have different tastes. Some people really would rather learn it from a textbook or read the textbook for extra information or practice problems, that kind of thing. And plus, to get this class accredited and transferable to other colleges, we have to put in what textbook we're using so that they know, even if we're not using the textbook, so they know what we're following along with. Our material might be in a slightly different order than the textbooks in the back of the book or in the back of the class, but it's going to be the same information. The other thing that we'll do, let's go back to the slides here. Here's some of the other information. This doesn't apply as much to this class because goggles are going to be provided as needed here. So you don't need your own goggles or anything like that. And we do have calculators as well if you don't have calculators. I recommend getting a decent scientific calculator. It doesn't need to be a graphing calculator, but if you've been using a TI-83 or whatever for your other classes, that's a good calculator. You can also use a calculator app on your phone. Main thing is I want you using whatever you're going to be using on practice problems is sorry, I said that backwards. Whatever you're going to be using on the test, I want you to be using when you're doing all of your homework. So you're used to the right buttons and everything, right? Trying to figure out how to use an unfamiliar calculator in a high stress timed environment like a test is not a recipe for success. So whatever you're going to be using on the test, keep that with you and use that for your practice problems. Which usually means not, for this class, means not a phone calculator. Just because you have strong feelings about having their phone on airplane mode. Hard to enforce. Yeah. So we'll go no phone calculators for this class, but we do have those TI-38s, I think, that are the standard scientific calculators or any other calculator you have that's not able to access the internet. Again, just make sure you're being consistent practicing with that so that you're not trying to figure stuff out on the fly on the test. There's not really a lab manual for this class. Other than PDFs that are going to get posted on Canvas and printed up for you. That is something, textbook and lab manual was actually the #1 cost of taking a science class besides tuition when I was in college, because you'd have to buy your Gen Chem textbook that was $300, and then you'd have to buy $150 lab manual on top of that. And this was 20 years ago, so that actually was a lot more based on inflation, since then. We've managed to do away with most of that, especially for this class, so you won't have to buy a lab manual or anything. You're just going to have to pay attention to Canvas, and when you're here for the lab days, which are going to be Thursdays, you'll be able to get your printouts and everything there. But they will also all be linked in the Canvas shell. So the other place that's going to be, like I said, I try to remember to link some of the assignments in the week overview pages, but the other place to look is going to be on the right-hand side. Look at your to-dos. Any upcoming assignments are going to be linked over here. If you click on them, it'll take you to a page that has both where you're going to submit the assignment, and it'll also have a PDF of the assignment itself. So if you're not here the day that something gets assigned, if you don't have a printed copy of it, you can still get the PDF version of that assignment by just going to that assignment link and then clicking on the PDF And then if you want to print it from there, you can, if you have access to a printer, or just ask me or Tom's. We can get stuff printed for you as well. The other place you can get to all your assignments is from the creatively titled assignments link on the left-hand side. If you click on the assignments, that'll bring you to a list of all of the outstanding assignments. There's not that many in there now because I don't have them all published. I don't want to overwhelm you. Plus, none of them have due dates assigned with them yet, because I'm going to assign the due dates as we go. So you'll just, as you get further and further in, you'll get more and more assignments in here, and in the undated assignments or in the past assignments tabs. Right, so those are the two places you want to really be paying attention to. Those week overviews is where you're going to get the slides and video links. And then your assignments are all good. You can find all your assignments and submit all your assignments from the assignments tab. Right. And as far as submitting stuff, I really would like it if everybody was able to submit stuff on Canvas, either from your Chromebook or from a smartphone or something along those lines, or if you have access to a scanner at home, anything works. I really prefer you to submit them on Canvas instead of on paper, mostly because, well, for several reasons. One, I don't want to carry around a lot of paper. My back's bad enough as it is. Two, I can't lose it if you submit it on Canvas. And you can't lose it and forget to turn it in, because you're going to have a timestamp on everything if you submit it on Canvas, right? So best way to make sure that it gets turned in on time and you have documentation that it was turned in on time is to do it on Canvas. And lastly, I'm really bad at keeping up with grading. Like, really bad. I apologize in advance because I'm going to get behind on grading, significantly behind. So when it comes time to midterm and studying and working on the practice midterm and stuff like that, you're going to want to have your old assignments. And if I'm behind on grading and haven't given you your paper assignment back, you don't have anything to study from. So it's in your best interest for a number of reasons to submit stuff on Canvas as much as you can. That being said, once you get through this first week and you demonstrate that you can submit stuff on Canvas, I will accept it on paper. I just prefer not to, for both of our sakes. The first week, I will actually require the assignments be submitted on Canvas, just so you can demonstrate, take the time to make sure that you can make your technology work for you and that you can get stuff submitted. Once you've done it once, if I force you to do it once, you're more likely to continue doing it. If I let you turn it in on paper the first week, you're just going to turn it in paper for the rest of the term. That's what I'm trying to avoid, right? So make sure we find something that works with your technology. Not everybody needs a smartphone for this class, but that is one of the easier ways to do it. If you have a smartphone with the Canvas app and some sort of scanner app as well, all you have to do is take pictures of it with your phone, upload to Canvas, pick the right assignment, and hit submit, and you're good to go. You can do it from your Chromebook. You can do it from other sources as well. Whatever you have, whatever technology you have, though, let's find a way to make it work for you this first week. And the other reason that really winds up being helpful is if you're on athletic teams, or if you're going to be doing any traveling, if you're going to be gone on when we have stuff that's due, it's really, really handy to be able to turn it in remotely, so you don't have to remember to turn it in on paper before you leave, right? Nobody's that far ahead of the game, are they? Everybody's going to have moments where, like, oh shoot, I didn't finish this assignment, but I have to leave tomorrow morning. How am I going to turn this in? You use Canvas, right? So make sure we find something that works for you. Any questions so far on the technology side? And again, I think most Apple products have a scanner app built into the phone these days. If you have an Android or something else, the app that I use is called Cam Scanner. Lets you take pictures, saves it all as a PDF, lets you take 4 pictures and save it as one PDF file, so I don't have 5 JPEGs submitted, all as individual files. That's fine if that's what winds up working for your particular setup. It makes my life a whole lot easier when it's one file, though, and you don't have to randomly click through things that are out of order and named, file 1 CHM100D-2557, right? That's not very descriptive, not easy for me to figure out what file goes with what problems. So I prefer it if it's all one file, but again, I'm not going to mark you down, obviously. I'm just trying to give you some insight into why grading is such a drag. All right, the other thing, grades. This one we had last. This is not the same grade distribution that we had before. Let me go back to the syllabus. I need to update this slide. 50, 50, 20. There we go. 50, 30, 20. So assignments, meaning homework assignments and labs, are going to be 50% of your grade. We'll have quizzes in this class as well. Most of the quizzes are open book, no time limit over the weekend quizzes. Basically, I just want to force you to think about chemistry outside of school hours, because the more I can force you to recall things before you get back on Monday, the better your recall will be. So that you will have some quizzes. There will be a couple of in-class quizzes that'll involve some memorizing element names and symbols, for instance, stuff like that. But that quiz category in your assignments is 80% of your total grade. The last 20% of your grade is exams. And this is for my other class where in that 12-week structure, we don't actually have time for a midterm. For this class, we'll actually have a midterm and a final because we have the time to dedicate to a midterm exam. So you'll have 2 tests worth a total of 20% of the grade. So not that bad, actually. You could, in fact, if you turned in every assignment and got a decent score on the test, you could still get a C in this class and not even take any of the tests. Get a 0 on the midterm and the final, and you could still get a C in this class, as long as you turn in your assignments. Right? This class is designed to be relatively gentle when it comes to people that struggle taking tests. Right? All you have to do is be on top of turning in your assignments, and that's literally 80% of the way there. Right? And I grade tests generously enough as well that even if you're a really bad test taker, if you've been coming to class and you put in a decent effort on test day, nobody's getting below a 50% on a test. Right? All you have to do is show up and have been working on the practice problems, and everybody should be able to get 50% on the test, which means you really could phone it in on test taking days and still get a B in this class relatively easily, as long as you're showing up, turning stuff in on time. Right? That said, if you're going into a STEM field, if you're going into any science or engineering field, regardless of how fair it is, testing is still the #1 way that you get assessed as far as how well you know material. So I'm also, while this is set up to be pretty gentle, I'm also going to work with you on test taking strategy, because whether you're good at taking tests or not now, if you're going into STEM field, you've got to get good at taking tests. Or at least it'll make your life a whole lot easier if we can get you better at taking tests. Luckily for you, that's actually one of my strongest areas. I'm really good at taking tests. Not to brag or anything. I'm just one of those people that I understand. It helps being, white cis male. That tests are written with me in mind. Sorry to say. I'm going to do my best to help everybody else get on board with how to take tests and how to optimize your effort so that you get the most points for the least amount of effort. That's really what test taking is all about. Get the most points in the smallest amount of time. Turns out that's a practice skill like almost anything else. So just because you're not good at taking tests yet doesn't mean you won't be good at taking tests. You can get better at all that, and then you can move forward in your college career being good at taking tests, or at least better than you were when you started. Any other syllabus questions? The homework in labs, I do accept late work, although I will mark you down for it. So you get stuff turned in as close as you can to the deadline. Basically, every lecture it is late, I'll take off 1 point. And then once you get, I kind of cap that at about, still get 5 out of 10 points, no matter how late it is, basically, unless you abuse that. So don't abuse that, and I'll be able to still give you at least half credit on L late work. When I say don't abuse that, I mean, please don't wait to turn everything in until finals week. One, that's the sort of thing that puts me behind on grading. And two, you're not actually getting the benefit. The whole point of the assignments is that you're getting them done while we're talking about that material so that you can keep up and know what we're going to be talking about next or understand what we're talking about next. You don't do any of the background assignments, you're going to be totally lost in lecture. And it's just not a good way to set yourself up to succeed because you're just going to feel overwhelmed and totally lost if you're not doing those assignments. That said, don't let one late assignment spiral you, right? Just because you missed one assignment, don't panic. Get it turned in as soon as you can, but don't create a cascade of that. I see that all the time and I'm the sort of person, if I had one assignment outstanding, that like, okay, that's no big deal. And I have 2 assignments outstanding. And then I start to panic a little bit. And then all of a sudden, before I know it, I'm 3 assignments behind. And it start really like checking out because there's like, oh, I'm not coming back from this. What am I even doing? It's just too overwhelming. Don't let yourself spiral just because you have one late assignment. Just get it caught up. Get it turned in. Get the confetti when you hit submit, right? Everybody loves the confetti on Canvas. Don't wait till finals week to get the confetti. Other points, attendance. I don't grade on attendance. I'm not going to mark you down if you're not here, but you're going to have to make up that, or learn that material on your own if you're not here. Which means read the slides, read the textbook, watch the YouTube videos. They're not terribly interesting as YouTube videos. I think I'm a lot more fun when you're in the classroom with me, rather than when you're just hearing my voice on a recording. Maybe that's just me, but be here as much as you can. But if you're not here, I'm not going to mark you down. Just make sure that you have, get caught up. The other thing is cheating is a really fine line because I want to encourage group work. I want to encourage people to work together, but don't let that turn into somebody's done the assignment, so I'm just going to copy it. Or I'm going to do problem 1 and you're going to do problem 3 and you're going to do problem 4. And then I'm just going to copy what you wrote. If you're going to do group work, work together. Understand what you're writing down. That's really the dividing line between plagiarism and group work. Do you understand what you turned in? If you understand what you turned in, then you really did work as a group. You didn't, maybe somebody had to teach you part of it, but you were there working as a group as long as you understood it. If you just copied it down and turned it in, that's not helping anybody, right? And that's not the point of these assignments. I'm not trying to create more grading just so I can get more behind. If I'm creating these assignments, it's because they're there to help you. So please spend the time to actually work on it and try to understand what you're turning in. This only really comes up on the take-home final. The final exam will have a take-home portion that's going to be 20 points. 2 problems, so it'll take a couple hours a piece. The line for that one, the way that I sort of test if I think somebody was cheating on one of these assignments and copying stuff down without understanding, the way that I test that is I give you a blank piece of paper and the problem and say, why don't you go ahead and try 1B. And if you don't even know where to start, then that tells me you didn't understand what you turned in. All right, so you should be able to, if you're turning it in, you should be able to sit down with a blank piece of paper and the problem and get back most of the way to the same answer. It doesn't have to be perfect, but that's sort of mentally how you can divide it for yourself between I'm plagiarizing or I actually understand and this was just group work. Make sense? The other thing I will caution you against is AI is really bad at science problems. Don't even bother. I would rather see your gibberish that makes no sense than AI generated gibberish that makes no sense. Right? So don't. And plus, I don't know how many of you have heard that ChatGPT is getting dumber. Anybody heard this? When they first let the public have access to ChatGPT, there was a certain class of math problems that ChatGPT could solve and get right about 98% of the time. After 6 months of the general public using ChatGPT, it was down to only 2% of the time was it getting the same problems right. So it's really bad at math. It's really bad at science problems and interpreting what the prompt means. So don't even bother. It's just not even worth it. And again, this doesn't really come into play until the exams. But stuff like Chegg, it's just not worth it. I'm aware of all those other services out there. Hopefully you aren't, because they're pretty garbage too. And it's really obvious when you turn in something that uses techniques that we didn't even use in class. I can spot that pretty well at this point. So just don't put either of us in that position. Just don't turn in, plagiarized stuff. All right. I know that nobody in this room would ever even think about doing any of that stuff, right? So, but I'm just reminding everybody that you shouldn't be doing that. That's one of, I know I said I hate grading, but I really hate dealing with academic dishonesty even more than I hate grading. So please don't make me do that. It's better for all of us if you just do your own work. Take the 0 if you need to on a problem instead of cheating on it, because then it's a whole can of worms, right? And 0 on part of a problem will affect your grade a whole lot less than a 0 on the entire assignment or dropping an entire letter grade in the class. So just don't do it. Questions? Okay. Some other good ideas. I know I mentioned that you don't have to be good at test taking. But if you're not good at test taking, plan around that. If you know you're bad at taking tests, don't set yourself up to be in a position where you need to get a 90% on the final to get an A. Right? Plan around your strengths. If you're not good at taking tests, then get good at turning stuff in on time. Make up for stuff you know you're bad at for now by being good on the other aspects of the class, right? So for instance, if you know you don't test well, make sure you try and get 100% on the labs. There are the numbers. So this is with the old grade distribution, so it's even easier. But if you get 55% on the exam and a 95% on assignments, which is totally doable if you turn stuff in on time. Most of the assignments are graded on completion, and I'll spot check a couple things here or there. For most of the homeworks, I'll give you the key for them, including how to get the right answer. I will show you how to get the right answer. So I'm not going to grade those on did you get the right answer. I'm grading those ones on did you write it down and turn it in. So it's pretty easy to get 95% on the assignments category just by turning stuff in. And let's say you're not as good on quizzes because those are a little bit harder. And then you still get a 55% on exams. You can still get a B in the class pretty easily, getting 55% in exams. On the flip side, if you know you're going to have to miss a lot of labs, then plan on doing well on the tests. Let's get good at taking tests. Make up for the fact that you're behind on your assignments. Again, nobody in this class would ever do this, but I was a terrible student. I mentioned I was good at test taking. I liked to plan around like, I know I'm going to be able to get a 95 on the final. So I'm just going to not turn in 3 assignments at the beginning of the class because I don't feel like doing them. That was really, really stressful for me when it came to finals week. So I don't recommend doing that. But if you know you're going to miss some assignments for whatever reason, because you're a procrastinator or because you're an athlete and you're going to miss a lot of days, you're going to have to do better on the tests. I still have panic nightmares about my grade pre-calc final because I set for that class for whatever reason. I don't know if I just wanted to torture the teacher. But I decided I was going to see how long I could go without turning in an assignment and still get to an A by the end of the class. And so at midterm, I think I still had a 0%. And I got to the point I needed a 98.5 on the final exam to get my A. And I did it, but it was really, really unpleasant. So I don't recommend doing it. Right? So be better than I was as a student. That said, I understand ADHD and trying to complete stuff and it just doesn't happen. I get that too. I'm gonna skip over this one. This is worth talking about. All right, I mentioned the quizzes and how I set them up so that they're due at midnight on Sundays. And you can't start them until usually about 5 p.m. on Friday. Basically, the quizzes over the weekend are set up so that you have to go do something else for a little bit and then you can take the quiz. I'm trying to force you to recall the information we talked about on our lectures over the weekend, because there's been a lot of research that shows if you recall something between 3 and 48 hours after you first learn it, that you retain it much better than if you go, say, even just like 52 hours later. So I'm trying to force you to recall it over the weekend so that you'll remember it better on Monday. And I've had pretty good results with this. Like I said, they're open book. There's no time limit on them. You just have to take them and submit them between 5 p.m. on Friday and midnight on Sunday. So that same research also shows that if you take that quiz like 15 minutes after class ends, you don't get that same benefit. You've got to go away and do something else and then come back to it in order to get that benefit. So that said, that's a little bit flexible. If you're going to be out of town and not have cell service for the entire weekend, then talk to me and we'll make sure we get you a deadline that works for you so that you can actually get that turned in. But that's the thinking behind these quizzes, right? They're not just set like that at random just to make your weekends miserable. They're set like that to try and help you retain the information there. Along the same lines, happy students learn better. I'm not going to stand up here and do stand-up comedy, but I'm going to try to make things interesting. And I'm also, in these quizzes, I'm going to have you ask me random questions. You get 1 or 2 points out of 10 every quiz is going to be ask me a question about chemistry. So that's your chance to ask me questions if you're feeling really confused about one of the problems or one of the topics we talked about. But if you're feeling pretty good about the material we're covering and you just want to ask me a random question about why salt melts ice, that's your time. And a lot of times I will pick a couple of those questions and actually just start lecture by talking about it, answering a couple of those or talking about them. They can be sci-fi questions. They can be environmental policy questions. Anything that you can even get close to relating to chemistry, it's fair game. And for this first week's quiz over this weekend is really just to so that I can get to know you, you can get to know me a little bit. So for this first week, I'll even open it up to personal questions, appropriate personal questions, obviously. So you can ask me random questions about me if you want to. Nobody cares that much about me, but if you had any questions about how I got to where I am, because you felt like you wanted to be a chemistry instructor one day, that'd be a good time to ask. And that goes along with happy students learn better, because I kind of think that is as an icebreaker. When you come in here, I can't control the outside circumstances of your life or what you may be going through with family or relationships or sports or whatever else. But what we can do is try and leave all that at the door. So these random questions at the beginning, it's not just because it's fun. It is fun. I enjoy answering these questions too. It's also to sort of serve as a palate cleanser. When you come in here, just try to leave everything else at the door. We'll start by talking about random fun stuff, and then we'll get into talking about new stuff that you need to get good at, that you're going to learn. Right? So it's just a sort of a way to allow you to leave the outside. It's not perfect, obviously. I'm not saying that you're having big issues that coming to chemistry class is going to solve that, but maybe it'll give you something else to focus on for a little bit. And if not, at least do your best. We'll try and keep things interesting at least. Last but not least, who's heard of fixed mindset versus growth mindset? This was a new idea when I started teaching, because especially when I first started teaching, the number of times I would have a student who would just say, well, I'm just bad at math. I don't get this because I'm bad at math. Or I heard this one a lot up here. I'm just bad at technology. I'm bad at computers. You're bad at computers now. You could be good at computers in a couple months if you wanted to. If you work at it, if you work with me. But coming into something with the idea that I have these things that I'm good at and these things that I'm not good at, that's called a fixed mindset. You already have an idea of what you are, who you are, what you're good at, what you're going to be good at in the future. That's not really how our brains work. Now, y'all are still in high school, so you're still developing a lot of those ideas anyway, so hopefully this is less important to you. But for my 30-year-old students at the college, this is a really big deal because they've been told for 20 years that they're bad at math. And they've internalized that. What I want everybody in this room to do is get really good at adding yet. Yeah, you're going to say, I'm not good at something. Say, I'm not good at this yet. Right? It's a really tiny thing, but there's actually been a lot of research to show that just adding that little one syllable at the end of those sentences changes the way your brain thinks about itself. And that's what's called growth mindset. The idea that if you put in work, if you continue to think about stuff, you can get good at things that you're not good at right now. Right? So just because you struggled with math in the past, or struggled with test taking, or struggled with technology, don't let that become a permanent feature. Keep a growth mindset. And I don't anticipate I'll hear a lot of that. Hasn't been my experience teaching dual at the high school so far. But if I do hear like, oh, I'm bad at math, I'm going to correct you or make you correct yourself more like. You're bad at math now. You're not bad at math 3 months from now. We can fix that, right? We can get better at stuff. That's what practice is all about. All right. Let's I'm going to go into that one. Nah. I already kind of talked about how we plan all of these courses out really, really carefully. Sometimes it's selfish on the side of the instructor. But in some cases, a lot of college classes are graded only by exams. Your final grade is what you get on the final. I don't think that that's very kind to people that struggle with test taking, but there has been a lot of research showing that performance on your exam is really strongly correlated with how much of these other assignments, they call scaffolding assignments, you do. Even if they're for no points, if you do the homework assignments, you have a much higher chance of doing well on the test. Right? So, but what that turns into is in some colleges, if I had 250 students in this class, I'm not grading 20 assignments for 250 students plus the final exam. So a lot of times courses wind up like, here's your recommended problems. Don't bother turning them in. I'm not going to grade them. Your grade is entirely your final. Because if you do the other work, the final is pretty representative of how well you understand the material. There's a lot of flaws with those studies as well, because they're doing those studies in big universities, when people that get admitted to big universities typically have already demonstrated that they're decent at taking tests. However, just if you do see random stuff like that, there's usually a reason behind all of these random course design questions. Let's see. This is all stuff we've already talked about. All right, last last note about the structure of this class. Who here sort of Starship Troopers? It was a decent sci-fi book about the dangers of fascism before it was a pretty good satire that went over most people's head from the 90s. But has some really good quotes in it. There's an old song that says the best things in life are free. Who's heard that saying before? Best things in life are not free. Best things in life are purchased with something other than money. Best things in life are the things that you have to work for. Things you will feel the most accomplishment and achievement if you put in effort. Right? And so this is Heinlein's quote. The best things in life are beyond money. Their price is agony and sweat and devotion. I'm going to try to avoid agony. It might feel like that to some of you that I'm picking these assignments because I'm torturing you. I'm not. I'm just trying to make you work hard, and you'll appreciate it once you get on the other side of it. But I just also want you to be aware that as much time and effort as I'm asking you to put into this class, I'm putting in that effort in as well. Right? So I'm not going to ask anything of you that I'm not willing. I'm not going to ask you to turn in stuff that I'm not willing to grade. I'm not going to ask you to do assignments if I'm not willing to work through them with you. Right? So if you have any questions, if you have anything where you're stuck on a problem, even if I give you the key and you don't understand the key, ask me. We'll work through it together because that's why I'm here. The only reason to have a teacher in this day and age when everything's available for free on the internet is so that you can converse with me, so that we can talk things through, so that I can adapt my instruction to your questions and your interests to help you understand this stuff. Otherwise, what's the point of having a teacher? Right? There's nothing that I'm going to tell you that you couldn't look up. What you get from asking me questions is that, one, I know where to go tell you to go look stuff up. But also, I can tailor it to your strengths, your interests, stuff like that. All right. Last, any more syllabus stuff? Any questions? I mean, anything seem unreasonable? Anything you'd really like to change about my syllabus? Yeah.
Do you know around how long the final is going to be?
It'll be 10 questions. And I'll give you a practice test the week before your last homework assignment will be a practice test. It'll be the same exact structure as the final exam. Usually people finish my tests. The final for this class usually takes people between an hour and an hour and a half. Most people, some people, if you're slow at test taking, will go a little bit longer, but we'll use the final exam period for this class. How many seniors do I have in here? Seniors cause an issue with the final exam schedule in graduation, but we'll work on that when we get closer. We'll figure out scheduling what works for that. But yeah, the midterm will be a little bit short. It'll still be 10 questions, but it'll be designed so that you can finish it in an hour and a half. That's the time we have in midterm week. And then the final exam, we'll use the full 2 hour. You'll be allowed to take the full 2 hours, although if you do the practice test, it'll usually take most people an hour to an hour. Any other questions? Yeah. So luckily for this class, you're scheduled to be here on Tuesdays as well as Thursdays, right? Tuesdays are sort of a catch-up day. There'll usually be a homework assignment, a paper assignment, but if you missed the previous week's lab, as long as it's a lab you can make up safely on that Tuesday, you'll be able to make up on Tuesdays. There will be some makeup time built into it. There's a few labs that you can't really make up, either because they use a really specific apparatus or they have tons of solutions or something like that, where it's not really safe to make that up while everybody else is doing a paper assignment. But for the most part, most labs can be made up. Just have to arrange for it with Mr. Thompson and I. Any other questions? All right. They say you're supposed to wait until it becomes an uncomfortable silence before you move on, but I'm really not very good at that. So feel free to interrupt me if I start talking again. If I don't wait long enough and you actually do have a question, interrupt me, because whatever I'm saying, I'd rather stop and answer your question. All right. Last couple random things. One of the things that I had to do as sort of a, not personal growth, professional development, was sort of write out what's my teaching philosophy. And I think it helps you. I like talking about it because obviously I like talking about science. But also I think it'll help all of you understand where I'm coming from a little bit. And I think that that's beneficial as well for you to understand why I'm a science teacher. And so I was able to if you ask, when I was asked, why do I teach science specifically? The two things that I came up with were, I think the universe is really, really cool and also really, really weird. And I really like that. I like that the universe is weird. I like that people are weird. I like weirdness, stuff that's out of the ordinary. I don't like things that are too predictable. So why wouldn't I want to study it? Why wouldn't I like talking about it? One of the reasons I struggled in grad school is because I had to be too focused on one thing. Really, I wanted to be studying this and that and this over here. And what about astronomy? I really like all facets of science, and I think it's all really cool. And I think chemistry is what ties it all together, which is why specifically I like teaching chemistry. And I think that everybody feels this to some extent. I think everybody likes understanding the world around them. Nobody likes going through life just being confused by what's going on, right? That's just, most humans are trying to put some sort of order to what's going on around them. And they've actually done studies on mice. This is one of those studies that you couldn't do it anymore. And that's a good thing. That's progress, because it was really not very, very kind to the rodents. They did this study on mice where they basically administered electric shocks to the mice. In one group of mice, they used it every time they touched the cage, they got shocked. Very quickly, they learned not to touch the cage. And then they were perfectly fine. The other group, they just shocked at random intervals with no reason to it, just to see what would happen. Again, psychologists can be a little bit messed up sometimes. We wouldn't do this anymore, but what they discovered is that the mice that just got random shocks, no reason, it's not only did they not learn to avoid touching the cage, they actually just died eventually. They actually, that first started falling out, they just wasted away, became something similar to what we would describe as depressed, and they just stopped moving because they couldn't make sense. There was no cause and effect behind why they were feeling this pain. We like order. We like understanding why things are the way they are. Even if when they're weird, we want to know why. Humans behave like that too. When there's randomness and there's no cause and effect to why things are happening in our lives, that's really chaotic, and that's really, really hard on our psyches. So I think everybody really likes understanding to some extent what's going on. I think everybody thinks that the universe is cool, whether it's really, really big scales or really, really small scales. Exactly what you want to study changes a little bit. But I think personally, that's why I like talking about science, is because there's all these really random little things about everyday life that you can tie back to science. And there's these really, really giant, cool things waiting to be learned out there. Does anybody know what this picture is? Has anybody heard of this or seen this picture before? This is called the Hubble Ultra Deep Field View. Basically, there was the Hubble telescope. Before the James Webb telescope, there was the Hubble telescope, right? Everybody's heard of the Hubble telescope? The administrator for the Hubble telescope, meaning the person who's in charge of allocating telescope time to other people, evaluating grant proposals and stuff like that, and deciding whose proposal is, valid enough that they get to control the Hubble telescope for, a couple minutes a day. The administrator was a former researcher, and she didn't have time to do research anymore because she was so busy with the paperwork and bureaucracy of running the Hubble telescope. But she still had access to the Hubble telescope for 3 minutes a day or something like that. That she was allotted that the use of the Hubble telescope for no reason other than study something you think is cool. Well, she didn't have a whole lot of time, so what she did was she had just focused the Hubble telescope on an empty bit of space. That empty bit of space appeared to have no stars in it, nothing there. But she took 3 minutes of exposure time on that same bit of empty space every day for a year and overlaid all of those together to get one incredibly long exposure time. And what she found was the earlier version of this picture, all of that is in that empty bit of space. Everything in this picture, other than there's a couple ones that have the little cross on them are stars. Every other piece of light on there is a galaxy. So just by taking a picture of something that looked like empty space and thinking about it and overlaying it, she discovered that there are billions and billions of galaxies. She was able to extrapolate that and say, well, if galaxies are more or less uniformly distributed, and this is 1/3 millionth of the sky, you can count the number of galaxies in this picture and extrapolate that to the entire sky and come up with an estimate for how many billions of galaxies exist in our universe. The only reason she figured that out, the only reason we know that and have this picture, is because she was just curious about what would happen if she took a picture of empty space. I find that amazingly cool. And there's little things like that too. This is on grand scale, right? Every single dot there is an entire galaxy of stars. And every single galaxy has billions and billions of stars in it. On the other hand, you can use chemistry and you can study the tiniest of things. This is a map that looks kind of like a subway map, right? Everybody's seen like maps of the London Metro and stuff like that. Except that every single dot, every stop on the subway map is a different molecule in a yeast cell. And every single line is a different enzyme that catalyzes a specific chemical reaction. So every single line is a different chemical reaction. And this is just for a single-celled organism. This is just for a yeast organism or for a yeast cell. And there's this complex, and even this is a simplification. Every single one of these lines, the protein responsible for catalyzing that had to be studied by somebody to figure out what the exact mechanism was. Every single line on this chart probably took 3 to 5 years of someone's life to study after they'd already spent 4 years in undergrad. So every single line there was somebody's dissertation, PhD dissertation. There's an incredible amount of human knowledge in this picture. And if you want to study biochemistry, you would focus on one little area of this. You might, like this circle right here is called the Krebs cycle. You've heard of the Krebs cycle, or the citric acid cycle. Few people have taken cell bio. It's the way it's connected to everything else, though. Like the way how complex these tiny systems are is incredibly cool to me. And again, I think everybody likes knowing how their own body works. Right? Everybody thinks they understand nutrition or is learning about nutrition to some extent. But understanding the actual molecular structure of these different compounds is really, really cool. Does anybody know what this is? I just pulled this picture off of Wikipedia. It's just a good rendering of this is a rhinovirus molecule virus, common cold. And the different colors, every little bump on there is a different atom. The different colors represent different proteins. And that's all around a tiny little DNA or RNA helix on the inside. So basically, if you scale this up just a little bit, this is about the size of maybe 2 or 3 of the enzymes responsible here. So this is still tiny compared to a cell, but it's so complex. It's thousands of atoms in a very specific structure that allow it to hijack our cells, basically, and use our cells to create copies of that cell. It's all viruses are, little bits of information that copy themselves. I think viruses are my coworker at the college actually studied virology in his grad school days, and he's He's really fun to talk to about viruses. He knows a whole lot more than I do. I know more of the chemistry side, but he is way better at the biology side, the molecular biology side. The other cool thing, this little repetitive section over here is how fat is built up and broken down in your body as energy storage. So the whole process of taking energy as ATP and converting it to fatty acids so that you have energy storage is represented in these little areas right here. And then this area, well, I can't read it from here. That's the biosynthesis. So that's building them up, and this is actually using the energy. You have a whole different set of enzymes for breaking them down compared to building them up. Biochemistry is really, really cool. It's really, really complicated. It's also the very first class in undergrad in college where I actually did need to read a textbook. When you get to upper division classes, that's when you can't just rely on lecture notes anymore. This was my wake-up call, was biochemistry, because it was a big 1,300-page textbook, and it would take me about 3 hours to read through a 20-page chapter. And I had to read it because it was just so dense. There was no way he was covering all the material in lecture. And I really developed a really strong liking for biochemistry as a result. It's a really fun class, but it was a ton of reading. There's so much material there. And we studied maybe a quarter of this map. And it was a huge 5-unit upper division course. And we still didn't study it in much detail compared to the people that actually live in that world. All right. We got 15 minutes left. We're not going to get to measurements today. So, other things I think are cool. Just what I want out of this is not just me talking about myself to talk about myself. I'm trying to find ways to connect with all of you individually. Everybody has different interests, but hopefully you and I overlap on at least one or two things. So here's just a general list of things that I think are cool. I like music. I like music a lot. I listen to a lot of music of a lot of different genres. And I'm still barely scratching the surface of all the music that's out there. The internet age is killing me when it comes to being able to keep up with all the cool music that's out there, because I just can't. But that and having kids. That doesn't stop me from listening to random stuff, but not as much as I would. So if you're into music, you're on the quiz this weekend, tell me what kind of music you're into. Give me a song recommendation. See if it's something I've heard of before, or maybe something I haven't. I like a lot of mostly rock-based music, but I like a lot of hip-hop, and I like a lot of metal. I've been listening to metal almost metal and bluegrass almost exclusively for the last year or so. Fun thing to think about. Bluegrass is just acoustic metal. I like games. I like video games. I like tabletop games. I don't play Dungeons and Dragons much anymore, but I play Pathfinder instead, which is basically the same thing. I don't have a group that I play with in town, so I'd make my kids play. I have a 10-year-old named Dash, and an 8-year-old named Valence, and how old is he? Two-year-old named Kuiper. Kuiper doesn't play D&D yet. But my other two kids both like playing Pathfinder with me. We have a lot of fun. We like playing all sorts of games too. They're both pretty good. Both my elder kids are pretty good at Settlers of Catan at this point. We don't play a whole lot of traditional board games because I like weird board games. I like weird stuff. Not to mention. Although play Monopoly with my son, my 10-year-old, and he will tell you about how it's not meant to be a good game. It's meant to be a representation of how the landlord class exploits the working class. He's still working on understanding exactly how that works, but he knows he doesn't like it. I like baseball a lot. I think baseball is a really cool sport. I like all sports though. I like food and drink. I used to make a whole lot of beer, but now I have a fixer-upper. So when I have 3 hours to myself that I could make a batch of beer, I wind up working on the house instead, as a way of productively procrastinating from keeping up with grading. And I like a lot of media. I consume a lot of media. I like a lot of books, movies, and TV. Good stuff though, not the mindless stuff. Like mostly sci-fi is what I gravitate towards, but I like a lot of anything that you can really dig in. My second choice of major after chemistry was going to be English and literary analysis because I really love overanalyzing things. So I really like a lot of literary movies and TV and books. I like Christopher Nolan a lot. Dennis Villeneuve. We watched my kids and I, my wife, binge watched both parts of Dune yesterday. I really like Dennis Villeneuve's interpretation of Dune. I think that that's really good. That was a lot of fun. All right, that's all I have. Find something on there that you want to ask me about or you want to give me recommendations for. That's going to be part of your quiz this weekend. Tell me something cool about yourself.